As with so many agricultural communities in Central Florida, Winter Garden was impacted greatly by the arrival of the railroad in the late 1800s. Let's step back in time and discover how the arrival of the railroad shaped Winter Garden's history.
There were two railroads that served Winter Garden and West Orange County. First was the Orange Belt Railway, which arrived in Winter Garden in November of 1886. The second railroad was the Tavares and Gulf Railroad. It arrived in Winter Garden in May of 1899. The Orange Belt was a narrow gauge railroad, which means that there was 36 inches between the two rails. A standard gauge railroad is 4 foot 8.5 inches. The Orange Belt Railway was the longest narrow gauge railway east of the Mississippi River, had a total of 157 miles of track. The Tavares and Gulf Railroad was a record holder, believe it or not, for a short line railroad of only 38 miles of track. In 1905, the T&G held the U.S. record for jumping the track the most times in a single round trip, a total of 9 times. In 1949, the T&G generated more perishable freight per mile of track than any Class I railroad in the U.S. A Class I railroad has thousands of miles of track. T&G had 38. So that was a pretty good accomplishment. And the last thing, the T&G was probably better known by its nickname, the Tug and Grunt. The railroads were important to this area. They brought both freight and passengers here. They exported, at first it was forest products, vegetables. Later it was vegetables and citrus. And then in the later years it was finally citrus was the main commodity that was exported. There were a number of commodities that the railroads brought into the area. Bulk petroleum products, bulk LP gas, materials for the making of cans for concentrate, fertilizer products, building materials, concrete products. Number of those kind of things were brought here for the businesses in Winter Garden and West Orange County. Most of these commodities were for the agricultural industry. This is the original second depot for the Tavares and Gulf Railroad here in Winter Garden. It was constructed in 1913 at a cost of $1,765. It replaced the original depot that was built just east of here in May of 1899. We can't find any records that the fires that occurred in downtown Winter Garden, there were at least 2, damaged the depot. We believe that because of the growth of the area, the railroad decided to build a larger, more modern station. So this station was constructed in 1913 and served this community until 1969, when most of the lines through here were abandoned and the services were transferred to a mobile agency. And then the railroad sold this building to the Central Florida chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, which is now the Central Florida Railway Historical Society, in October of 1979 for us to use as a permanent meeting home and a railroad museum. The museum opened officially May 21st, 1983. The museum was originally operated by it was then the Central Florida chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. In 2003, the society joined forces with the Winter Garden Heritage Foundation and the City of Winter Garden, and we're operated under a joint agreement between those 3 organizations. We have, of course, several items from the Tavares and Gulf Railroad. We have several items from the Orange Belt Railway. We have a large letter file cabinet from the South Florida Railroad that was in the original depot in Orlando. We have a 6-man motor car. We have a single-person velocipede. We have several other items from some of the predecessor railroads here in Central Florida. I was born and raised in Oakland. We lived about a block from the T&G. My dad used to take me out to wave to the train before I could even walk. So I got to know all the crew. and just developed a love for railroading history and history of West Orange County.
Like so many Central Florida agricultural communities, Winter Garden was changed forever with the arrival of the railroad in the late 1800s. Small, slow, narrow gauge lines were still far superior to shipping products by ox cart and steamboat. The economic impact of the railroad's arrival helped to shape the modern Winter Garden we know today.